Welcome back into the Aces Loaded podcast. Today's guest is Mark Reed, our first guest who is a coach. So congratulations on that and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Mark is the third-round pick by the Chicago Cubs back in 2004. As a catcher, he's the Aces hitting coach as well. Let's start there. The catching position. When did you first fall in love with that and want to become a catcher?
Ooh, this one goes way back. So my uncle was a rep for a few different sporting goods companies. Bike was one of them, Zet at one time. Anyway, I got my first set of gear when I was 8 years old, and I remember my brothers playing. They were, Jeremy was 5 years older than me, and then my oldest brother Tim was 6.5, and so they were playing Little League, and I still wasn't up until the age to start Little League yet, but I already had a first set of gear, and so me and my friend, he would throw to me and I would catch, and I already had this little set, and I think my parents still had that set just a few years back when we were rummaging through stuff, but I remember that little set of gear that he made for me, or he had somebody make for me. So it goes all the way back to 7-8 years old.
I want to hear about your draft experience though too, because I'm sure it's much different than it is now, because we talk to players on this podcast about their experience, and it's usually around some kind of electronic. They see it on the TV, on the Twitter. You didn't have that. So what was your draft experience like?
So ours was dial-up internet, listening to the draft. At that time, I still had a couple days left of high school, so I think there was maybe 2 or 3 days left of high school. It's like, those last few days when you're really done with the classes and you're signing yearbooks and hanging out. Yeah, but I do remember missing one of those last few days for the draft, and had a few people over. I kind of thought that I was going to go on day one, but you never know. It's always a crapshoot with the draft, right? And Jeremy had already started his pro career. He was kind of running through the minor leagues. He was already in AA, and and making his way to the big leagues really that year. But anyway, we had the internet going. I was getting calls from my agent during the first round, and then early in the second round, I got a few calls from scouts on that day, just asking me if I was still on my number that I was going to sign for, and so it was a lot of hectic, crazy, questions were asked. Anyway, agent called at the beginning of the third, and he's like, "Are you ready?" And I was like, "What do you mean I'm ready? I'm listening to the draft. One ear I'm listening to the draft, and the other ear I'm on the phone."
You're listening, right? It's just
yeah. And then he calls right back, and he goes, "Did you hear it?" And I was like, "Paul, give me a second." And so I hang up on my agent and hear. So his internet must have been a little bit better than ours at that time, but I got to hear my name called, and then the area scout that signed me, gave me a call right away and was very excited. We were all excited. Like I said, I had a few. I just had some close family, and my high school baseball coach was there. A couple buddies came over right after school, and we all kind of celebrated together.
That's a lot of decisions to make at 18 years old. You're fielding those questions from scouts. Are you still going to sign for that number? You're 18. I mean, how much does your family, are they in those conversations, your agent? Because that's a lot to put on an 18-year-old kid.
Yeah, definitely. Our whole thing going into that, like I said, Jeremy had already been drafted 2 years prior, and his had already started his pro career, was the minor league player of the year in 2003, and then making his major league debut the year I was drafted. So I had a lot of help with kind of that. He had already gone through it. Yes, he was a college player, so it was different from me as a kid signing out of high school, but I did have help on his end, but also my parents were pretty educated on kind of how it went and making the best decision. But our whole thing, my mom was like, "Promise you'll go back to school, and let's go to school unless we do get what we want, or it is life-changing money and that type of thing. The opportunity is life-changing." So we were pretty set on what it was and what it took, and if not, school is okay. And I was okay with that. I was signed to go to Long Beach State, and Jeremy went there for 3 years. It was a great experience for him. It molded him into the player he was, and physically he got stronger, and I felt like I could do the same thing if I were to go the college route. But the opportunity did present itself, and I couldn't pass up a chance to turn pro out of high school. So
that was my next question about how much your brother helped you throughout that process, because he had gone through that. You mentioned it. He went to college, but it's a very similar situation. You answered that though. You signed with the D-backs. I think it was in 2011. I was going to say 10. 2011. You played with them for a bit, and then the bullpen catcher job comes up. How does that all come up? Because in my opinion, in several other people's opinions, that is one of the best jobs to have in the world.
Yeah. So I signed with the D-backs in 11. That was kind of an interesting time in my my career, my life too. I had 6 years with the Cubs, and going to a 6 year free agent, and trying to seek a lot of different opportunity of where to sign, and agents working for you, but I wasn't getting that much feedback. And so Jeremy and I we're playing golf in the off season, and he's like, why don't we just start reaching out to teams, like let's just do this ourselves. And we didn't really feel like our agent was kind of pulling his end at that time, and so we just kind of used our resources in the game. And Jeremy had played with Mike Bell. Mike Bell became the farm director with the Diamondbacks, and Jeremy reached out to Mike, and Mike returned the call right away. And then I got on the phone with Mike, and next thing you know, it was probably a week or 10 days later that I had signed with the Diamondbacks. And so that was going into the 2011 year, and I went back to A-ball with them for a little bit, and then Mike pushed me to AAA here in Reno for a few months, and got to experience the AAA level for the first time, and created some really good relationships within the Diamondbacks organization, and they wanted to re-sign me right away after that year. So I came back in 12 and came to Reno for the first half of 12. We had 3 catchers here, so it was kind of splitting time. Wasn't getting that many at bats here. Mike and I had talked about a few different things like that year. Just whether it be, is it time to go into coaching, scouting? Is there ways? Just ways to stay in the game. I was kind of getting to not the end of I was 26 years old, but still, like, what was the next pathway? Stay playing. He wanted me to make the decision I wanted. Anyway, bullpen catcher kind of gets banged up. Trevor Bauer had gone to the big leagues, and he does a extenuous long toss program, and so Matuza's kind of broke down. His elbow started barking, and he had some other things with his knees and things like that. But so Mike called me. I remember we were in Colorado Springs. Mike called me, and he said, "Hey, there's an opportunity for bullpen catcher in the big leagues. Like, would you be willing to do this? I want you to talk to your family and make this decision, but I don't want this to be just like yes or no right now. Like, just take a few days." Anyway, I called him back within a few hours and said, "Yeah, I'm ready to go. Like, whatever they need." And I was good at that time. I was good. Like I said, I was 26 years old, and I could have kept going. I could have kept grinding it out, but I was good with what I did playing, and it was my opportunity to go to the big leagues. So halfway through 12, I started, that pathway of my career.
And what's that experience like? Because you get to, for those that don't know, you get to travel with the team. I mean, you're a part of the team, right? So just take me through that first year, I guess it was the second half of that first year. So your experience and your favorite thing as a bullpen catcher.
Well, that was, that all happened fast. Like I said, I went from AAA player to doing that job. Didn't really know exactly what it all entailed. I knew that you're kind of part of the coaching staff. You're kind of, backing with the players and hanging with the players and things like that. I had come up with a lot of these guys too. So, I mean, I had already had the relationships and friendships with some of these guys that were coming up. And then guys that Jeremy had played with. J.J. Putz was in that bullpen, and Willie Bloomquist was on that team. And so there was a lot of guys I already knew, which helped. but they were in a pennant race. When I first got there, right before the All-Star break, I think they were 3 games out. We had beat the Dodgers the last 2 games, Saturday and Sunday, and I think we were 3 games out going into the second half, and it was they had won a division in 11, so it was a very good team, a very similar team, and so it was intense. Kirk Gibson as a manager, and Alan Trammell and Don Bailey, these are some old school guys with a ton of baseball experience that was very, very intense. So what I remember most is and the most fun that I had that year was being in that competition of that big league life every day. That win or loss every day in the big leagues, it matters so much, and it changes everybody's mood. It changes the playing flight. But that's what it's about, right? Because every game does mean that much.
Let's shift to this year, AAA. Your time as a hitting coach, first in Hillsborough and then here in Reno, because I want to talk about the staff a little bit too, because it is a special staff, right? Pieced together. You guys have known each other for a while. What is, in your opinion, the most special thing about this coaching staff in 2023?
Well, it's pretty cool. Blake and I go a ways back. 2007, he signed with the Cubs, and his first ever day was coming and playing in a doubleheader that I played the front end of the doubleheader, and that was his first game playing in pro ball at an affiliate. Was the second game of a doubleheader. He ends up moving into my apartment and living together. We lived together probably parts of 3 or 4 years in the minor leagues. Got to know his family very well, and just created a really, really good bond and friendship over the years of playing. And then it comes full circle after after I did that bullpen catching job for 8 years. Came down in player development in 2019, and Blake had become a minor league manager a couple years before that. And so for us to do this together, at this level, and kind of fall on our dreams to get back to the big leagues as coaches is really cool. Travis Danker and I got to spend the alt site together, as well as Blake, and I had Doug Drabeck as a pitching coach in A-ball with the Diamondbacks my first year I signed over here, and the ties with Jeff Bajanero go way back. I mean, he grew up 15 minutes away from where I did, and he was AA teammates with my brother in Birmingham. So I think there's a lot of ties. This game does that. You just never know. It's a small baseball world out there, but to be as close as we are, and to like I said, experience this together, and try to follow our dreams of getting back to the big leagues, all of us as coaches now, is pretty cool and rare, I think.
Appreciate you, Coach.
No problem.